More than 35 distinct groups of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples possess significant traditional connections with various parts of the Great Barrier Reef and its surrounds, while more than 70 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander traditional owner groups have long continuing relationships with the reef. In 1992, the High Court of Australia ruled that Indigenous Australians have rights over many of their traditional lands, referred to as native title. By 2006, more than 70 Indigenous Australian groups had been granted native title over various islands, reefs, and portions of the coastline bordering the reef. In 1995, the Indigenous Partnerships Liaison Unit was established by the Great Barrier Reef Marine Protection Authority, and the IPLU's purpose is to work alongside Indigenous communities to better manage the Great Barrier Reef, allowing the land's traditional owners input into how the reef is managed and ensuring traditional practices continue. Today, several communities are involved in co-management processes in the Great Barrier Reef area adjacent to their territory, with a variety of advisory and practical roles. Prior to colonisation, the region's Indigenous peoples engaged in a traditional lifestyle of hunting and gathering, harvesting plants and animals from the region as a means of survival. Indigenous communities recognise the importance of sustainable practices in ensuring the future security of species and the reef ecosystem as a whole. A widely held cultural belief among Indigenous individuals and communities is that aspects of the natural environment possess sacred spiritual significance, as an example of intrinsic value. Such belief has and continues to heavily influence traditional management of the reef ecosystem, providing an emphasis on conservation. The reliance on resources harvested from the reef over thousands of years has led to the development of sustainable management practices with an emphasis on intergenerational equity. Traditional management practices. Traditional management practices employed in managing the Great Barrier Reef are heavily founded upon traditional ecological knowledge, being that derived from and passed from generation to generation through stories, ceremonies, and rituals. Such cultural knowledge includes knowledge of the reproduction cycles of species, moon cycles, and an understanding of the availability of different species. Practical knowledge possessed by the region's Indigenous peoples and the underlying principles of subsistence, sustainability, custodianship, and reciprocity guide the traditional management of the Great Barrier Reef. Examples of traditional management strategies which continue today include the controlled access to reefs as an example of exclusion, the use of traditional small-scale, low-intensity fishing techniques which leads to the limited removal of species, and limits imposed on the size of fish to discourage removal of small organisms and ensure future numbers. The Land and Sea Country Partnerships Program, as part of the Australian Government's broader Reef program, engages traditional owners to share and increase their knowledge base in sea country management. A compliance training package which has been developed under the Australian Government's Caring for Our Country Reef Rescue Land and Sea Country Indigenous Partnerships Program is currently being administered by the GBR MPA in the intention of engaging traditional owners and Indigenous communities in the management of the reef's marine resources and cultural diversity. A specialised Indigenous Ranger program is also employed within the region in the aim of improving marine conservation. Currently, Indigenous rangers in Cape York are being trained how to use drones to monitor the health of the Great Barrier Reef. Various forms of legislation have also been developed which govern the use and management of the Great Barrier Reef. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Zoning Plan of 2003 recognises that under Section 211 of the Native Title Act of 1993, native title holders may undertake traditional use of marine resources in the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. A formal agreement known as a Traditional Use of Marine Resources Agreement also enables traditional owners and management agencies to conduct compliance activities, monitor plants, animals, and human activities. Indigenous communities also employ traditional measures on a localised scale, such as an adherence to totems and taboo sites, providing protection for certain species and culturally significant areas as an act of stewardship or custodianship. Contemporary management of the Great Barrier Reef. The Great Barrier Reef was officially declared a World Heritage Site in 1981. The protection and management of ecosystems that have been assigned a World Heritage status fall to the federal government. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority is the main agency that advises the Commonwealth Government in the management of the reef. Other agencies also assist in the management of the reef through specialised roles such as research, marine transport safety, marine fisheries, and quarantine. Local councils manage the areas along the coast that are adjacent to the reef. Islands that are within the park but not owned by the Commonwealth are protected as island national parks by the Queensland Wildlife and Park Service. Only a small amount of these islands are privately owned. Zoning. In 2004, the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority announced the creation of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Zoning Plan. The reason behind this plan was developed to allow selected human activities to take place with no degradation to the overall environment. Things such as tourist developments and fishing was restricted to certain areas. Anchoring and mooring. Boat anchors have a major impact on the reef. To combat this damage, the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority has installed public moorings. These moorings are permanently fixed to the seabed, allowing boat skippers to tie up without the need of anchoring, which removes the damage that anchors cause to the seafloor by damaging anchors and anchor chains across the seafloor. The zoning plan restricts any anchoring on many parts of the reef. However, the huge mass of the reef causes difficulties for police to enforce this rule with all marine skippers. Tourism. Tourism has become the most intensive activity on the Great Barrier Reef. Tourism has both negative and positive implications that come along with it. It can help spread awareness to the reef and educating people of the delicate ecosystem, whilst it can be equally as damaging. The major issue with the tourism industry on the reef is that it is geographically highly concentrated. This means that a majority of the people visit on a certain area of the reef. For example, 85% of the reef's visitors tend to visit around Cairns or the Whitsunday Islands. These two locations represent only 7% of the reef. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority will not give approval to any pontoons on the reef until a detailed environmental impact statement is completed. With thousands of boats moving through the area, it is imperative that the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority manage the movement of them. By enforcing and regulating speed limits, damage that's caused by the wake is thus prevented. Other initiatives include an education program that educates people on the need to minimize pollution caused by boating. Television, radio, and newspaper advertisements, along with signs on posts at boat ramps containing information on the matter. Improving water quality. Joint research with the Commonwealth and Queensland governments in the early 2000s found that while most of the 19,000 individual reefs that make up the Great Barrier Reef system are in good condition, many of the offshore and fringing reefs are being degraded by poor water quality. These findings led to the creation of the Reef Water Quality Protection Reef Plan in 2003. By 2013, it is hoped that the flow of degraded water onto the reef will be halted altogether. The plan's main objectives were to reduce the amount of water pollutants entering the Great Barrier Reef, to rehabilitate the river catchments and then better manage them, regional plans to better manage river catchments.